ET, weeknights at 6:30 on The Source.
The following is an NBC special presentation.
Antarctica, the continent at the bottom of the world which nobody owns. What bonanza of mineral riches lies beneath this ice? And when they are found, will drilling rigs and excavators go in?
NBC News presents Treasure at the South Pole with correspondent Keith Morrison.
One-seventh of the world, yet there are no native people, no polar bears, no trees, no grass. The interior is a lifeless desert drier than the Sahara. It's a land with the world's purest air, cleanest water, and brightest sunshine. A kind of paradise with no germs or diseases. You don't even need a passport to land here.
Some countries want to turn Antarctica into a world park or a wilderness reserve where mining and drilling would be banned forever, and environmentalists are whipping up public support. Other countries say the continent's riches may be needed for economic survival and they can't afford to close off any options. The question of Antarctica's untapped resources is a political time bomb.
Antarctica, a continent of ice larger than the United States and Mexico, surrounded by barriers of pack ice as big as Canada. Ice up to 3 miles thick, stretching for 3,000 miles. Ice that buries whole mountain ranges, bigger than the Rockies. Ice that breaks off to form incredible icebergs, some as big as Delaware, which drift away into the Southern Ocean. Untouched, unspoiled, Antarctica is a continent so pristine you want to wipe your feet before stepping on its icy shore. But step on it, men did. In the heroic age of exploration early this century, national expeditions raced for the South Pole. The Norwegians used dog teams and won the race, but Captain Robert Falcon Scott of Great Britain, beaten by a month, died on his way home and won the glory. The words Scott scribbled at the South Pole defined the continent. Great God, this is an awful place. But despite the dangers, adventurers and explorers took the challenge of the ice. Many perished. They sat out the winter months of polar darkness in small wooden huts where temperatures plunged to 160 degrees below freezing and gales whipped in at 200 miles an hour. In spring, they set out on journeys into territories so remote and unknown they could and did name mountains after their girlfriends. Captain James Cook said on discovering its outlying islands 2 centuries ago, "I make bold to declare the world will derive no benefit from it." Wrong. The freezing seas around the continent teem with life. A tiny shrimp called krill. Birds and seals feeding on krill land on the shore to breed. To these oases of life in the desert of ice came hunters in search of prey and profit. The first victims were seals. Hunters slaughtered immense herds and skinned them for their fur. Then whales, chased, harpooned, butchered. The few accessible beaches became killing fields. Hundreds of thousands of penguins were fed as fuel into the pressure cookers to boil down the whale blubber. When the harvest peaked in 1934, more than 1,000 whales were butchered every day, 45,000 in that single bloody summer. Whale populations have never recovered. Greed for whale oil and the need to control the hunt brought governments to the continent. For the first time in Antarctica, countries said, "This is mine." Between 1908 and soon after the Second World War, the continent was sliced up like a pie. The first slice was claimed by Great Britain. Others followed suit. France, Australia got nearly half, New Zealand, Norway. Argentina and Chile claimed overlapping sectors, which also overlapped that of Great Britain. The superpowers weighed in. Neither the United States nor the Soviet Union recognized other claims. They both reserved the right to grab the whole pie. Even Nazi Germany had tried to claim a piece, airdropping darts engraved with swastikas onto the ice. After the war, conflicting territorial claims turned the cold continent into a hot spot. The Chileans were in dispute with the Americans, who were in dispute with the British, who had their own problems with the Argentinians, and so on. But while the politicians squabbled, the scientists were discovering the benefits of cooperation. The quest for knowledge overcame the pursuit of territory. Antarctica became a continent of science. In 1961, all 12 countries with scientists on the ice signed the Antarctic Treaty. It made a tenth of the globe a zone of peace. Weapons were banned. Nuclear testing and dumping were prohibited. Territorial claims were frozen. Even the superpowers could inspect each other's bases. Antarctica would be run by the 12 original nations. Others could join this Antarctic club by carrying out substantial scientific activities on the ice.
The treaty could be modified by unanimous agreement until 1991, when any member of the club could demand the whole treaty be reviewed or could withdraw from the agreement. Until now, it has made Antarctica a place where countries have buried their differences, have built these research stations, and in theory at least have worked together in quest of scientific knowledge.
With its dry and unpolluted air, the continent is a huge clean lab for monitoring environmental changes in the rest of the world. The cores extracted from deep within its ice hold climate records going back hundreds of thousands of years. Every summer, about half the human population of Antarctica is American. The National Science Foundation spent $152 million last year to bring nearly 2,000 people here. Every spring morning at America's Palmer Station, an $8,000 test instrument measures the decline of ozone in the stratosphere.
Balloon up, payload up.
We're starting to get some ozone here. 44.6, 42.7.
Ozone protects us from the cancer-causing rays in sunlight. Its depletion was first discovered in Antarctica.
Showing some ozone here, not so much ozone there.
Dr. Joe Farman led the British team which discovered the ozone hole in 1984. Now he is measuring against a tide mark made in 1909 whether global warming is melting Antarctic ice. If all the ice melted, the sea would rise to the Statue of Liberty's waist. Despite fears, there has been practically no change in sea level here in 80 years. Geologists looking under the ice are increasingly convinced that a treasure trove of mineral deposits and giant oil fields is just waiting to be found. Millions of years ago, Antarctica, then much warmer, was the keystone of a supercontinent that gradually broke up, the pieces floating away to become South America, Africa, India, Australia, and New Zealand. It follows that the rich oil and mineral deposits found in and around the other continents will be present here. Geologist John Spletstoser.
There may well be a bonanza in the Antarctic as far as minerals are concerned because geologically there is a deposit in the Dufek Massif, which is very similar geologically to an area in South Africa, which is very rich in platinum. The other possibilities are, let's call it the largest coal field in the world. Antarctica has about a 2,000-mile, more or less continuous bed of coal stretching across most of the continent. Let's go on to another one, which could be oil and gas, which presently has not been discovered anywhere in the Antarctic. The possibilities are good. There are a number of sedimentary basins identified beneath the ice sheet and at the edges, and as well as on the continental shelf. The similarities to the Arctic are there. The environment is hostile, certainly, but Arctic technology could be transferred to the Antarctic. Problems in sea ice, icebergs, and so on are identical.
The possibility of finding minerals under the ice was not considered when the Antarctic Treaty was signed 30 years ago. As long as the only resource to come out of this place was scientific data, then countries could afford to shelve their land claims and share the facts and figures. But now there is the smell of oil and platinum in the air, and gold and rubies and diamonds and who knows what else. The hope of finding treasure at the South Pole has changed the picture, has exposed the treaty's possibly fatal weakness. It has no rules to control drilling and mining, no way to decide who owns what valuable resources. The greed of nations has returned to Antarctica.
Safety regulations are being... We're in an era of fierce competition, spanning not just the nation...
For these demanding times, BMW introduces the safest 3 Series ever built, with a near-zero maintenance engine and perfectly balanced handling. The dramatically new 325i. BMW meets the demands of the 90s with its spirit intact.
It's not easy to pull yourself away from a bowl of Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Those 2 scoops of raisins taste so good, you'll find that once you start, you can't leave them behind. As long as 2 scoops
want gimmicks. I want a long-distance phone company I can count on. I'm happy with AT&T, so, you know, that's where I'm going to stay.
In dealing with them, in signing up with them, the information they sent me, whatever they told me they were going to do, they did.
Dependability. That's the name of the game, really. AT&T, they'll stand by their word.
It means I have the best. When I have the best, it means that I can rely on it.
Hey there! I've heard you liquid detergents are doing a great job.
What are you doing in the laundry room?
Heard the news? I can help you guys clean better. Look at these smelly, dirty socks. I'll wash this sock in one of you liquid detergents, this one in the same detergent, plus Arm & Hammer baking soda. You know how well I clean and deodorize. Compare. My sock looks cleaner, smells fresher, too. For a cleaner, fresher wash, use me with your liquid. Half a cup is all you need.
Before watching Fresh Prince.
Now we'll hear status reports on sales, distribution, and productivity.
Sales, down.
Distribution, down.
Productivity, down.
After watching Fresh Prince.
Yo, what's happening?
Sales are slamming.
Distribution is down.
Productivity is popping. Did I miss something?
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Monday on NBC.
So far, the wealth of Antarctica is no more than a promise. Geologists can sample only the bits of rock that stick up, the peaks of mountains buried in ice. Mineral resources are undoubtedly here, but where? And how do we beat these hostile conditions to exploit them? The costs of tunneling down through the moving ice and transporting oil and ore across this frigid desert would be prohibitive. Or would it? Much the same was said about drilling for oil in the North Sea and on the North Slope of Alaska. Outsiders feared that the continent's riches would remain the exclusive property of the Antarctic Club. So other governments acted quickly to buy their way in. Geologist John Anderson says scientists became prospectors.
Let's face it, there are certain countries that have invested most of their time and money as far as Antarctic research is concerned in collecting multi-channel seismic data, the kind of data that is needed to assess oil and gas or explore for oil and gas.
Powerful new icebreakers were launched. Germany's Polarstern cost $120 million. More and more bases appeared on the ice as nation after nation tried to earn membership in the club. To head off chaos, the treaty members suspended all prospecting while they hammered out rules to deal with any future bonanza. But rising oil prices made potential Antarctic reserves an attractive proposition. Nations could not wait to get in. Until the oil crisis in the 1970s, the original 12 countries had about 25 permanent bases strategically placed around the continent. Then came the rush of new countries. Today, there are more than 50 year-round bases on the ice, with many more in summer, and the membership of the club has swelled to 25, with more countries on the way. The race for Antarctica is nowhere more evident than on King George Island. 11 countries built their bases here, most of them in the last 8 years. After 8 months of winter isolation, the Brazilians welcomed the relief ship to their base. More than half of all Antarctic bases, including those of the United States, are run using military personnel. Brazil bought its way into Antarctica cheaply. it spends less than $1 million a year. Brazil's station is built of cargo containers. Price mattered less to South Korea. In 2 months, they threw up a $10 million base that's known locally as the Hilton of Antarctica. Keeping 14 men here for the winter costs another $2.5 million a year. The Chinese were in such a hurry, they didn't even do a site survey before bringing 600 construction workers to throw up the Great Wall Station. This Great Wall is already falling apart. Uruguay's base is cheap and cheerful. One man joked that Uruguay's most sophisticated scientific instrument was a thermometer, but it's a voting treaty member. The Soviet and Chilean bases sit cheek by jowl. With so many bases on the island, scientists are in each other's way. Dr. Wayne Tribblepiece.
It's, to me, ridiculous that so many bases are crammed together here, given that the main reason we're in Antarctica is to do science. There are only so many animals, birds, and/or so much weather you can record here. And within about 25 miles, there are some 9 to 11 bases pretty much recording the same things. Scientists are on top of each other here. In some cases, on the way in today, I saw a brown skua, one of the species that we've studied for 12 years, with West German tags on it, with East German tags on it. They must no doubt have a lot of our birds floating around over there with their tags on it. It's starting to get confusing even for the scientists here.
And confusing for the birds, too. Birds exposed to man change their habits. They are constantly disturbed by a stream of scientists. The penguins are weighed, counted, lifted, and studied by the United States, Poland, Germany, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile. And they're being filmed by the Japanese. Much of the science done in this part of Antarctica is of little real value. When 3 Chinese started going gray during their year here, they began an official project to find out why.
Oh.
Instead of coordinating research, most nations, like the Chinese, do what they want. Much of the science is weak and repetitive. Some research could just as easily be done at home. At Poland Station, scientists collect seawater samples and pollute them to simulate an oil spill. In the lab, they recreate a storm at sea to measure how quickly the oil is broken down. Despite the enormous costs for a poor country, Poland believes it worthwhile keeping a permanent base of 19 men here with better food than they can expect at home. In many cases, science is just an excuse to have a foothold in Antarctica. At the Soviet Union's Bellingshausen station, the biggest, oldest, and dirtiest on the island, we found 65 men, but no research. Many were construction workers who said life was at least a pleasant change from Siberia. Soviet bases have been publicly criticized by one of their own scientific chiefs as hotbeds of bootlegging, thievery, and other vices. Keeping the flag flying is the real job. And it's not a lot of fun. At best, getting to Antarctica and keeping bases going absorbs about 3/4 of the cost and occupies 3 out of 4 people. These are not Soviet scientists going into the field. They're painters and welders, needed to work at this eyesore, a Soviet tank farm. It's the same story all around the continent. Ships like this British one resupply bases with everything man needs to survive. Every year brings more bases, more people, more buildings to heat, more bodies to feed. And Antarctica is burdened with more debris. A little garbage goes a long way. What man leaves behind is here to stay. Yet everyone has dumped and walked away from their garbage and unwanted bases. Abandoned bases are classified as emergency refuges and left to the penguins, the ghost towns of Antarctica. The treaty's rules for waste disposal have been ignored. Garbage is bulldozed into landfills or burned in open barrels, releasing toxic fumes into the pure air.
When the treaty partners started talking about allowing drilling rigs and mining companies to Antarctica, alarm bells sounded. If scientists could leave this sort of mess in their quest for knowledge, what would be the legacy of roughnecks and gangs of miners in their race for profit? Threats to the environment brought a new player to the game. The arrival of Greenpeace may have changed the fate of Antarctica.
Come on, Max. Hey, do you shampoo a lot? I do, a couple of times a day. That made my scalp feel tight, itchy. Not dandruff, but dry scalp. You know your scalp's skin. It needs moisture. So now I'm using dry scalp shampoo every day. It helps keep moisture in my scalp other shampoos can strip away. I'm not going to stop shampooing, so I'm going to keep using dry scalp shampoo.
Dry Scalp Shampoo from Head & Shoulders, your daily defense against dry scalp.
What makes the Honda Accord so different? Honda's advanced technology. In fact, one of the most amazing attributes of the Accord is its ability to transport you into the future. Really, just get in and bingo, the future. Now, can your car do that?
For great tasting breakfast burritos and chicken fajitas, you used to have to go somewhere like here. But now McDonald's is serving up great breakfast burritos and chicken fajitas, and they're just 99 cents each. And you know where McDonald's is.
When you get to a sale and it's not everything you expect, come to the National Home Appliance Sale at Sears Brand Central, where virtually every major brand's on sale. And save $48 on this large capacity Kenmore washer dryer pair. But hurry before we get cleaned out.
Treasure at the South Pole will continue.
For Quality Drama Tuesday, NBC is the place to be.
And all the evidence points at you.
Emmy-winning stars, powerful stories, in the heat of the night. And TV Guide calls it the best new series.
This is not a question of win or lose. It's a question of justice.
Law and Order, after In the Heat of the Night. Quality Drama, NBC Tuesday.
I got a hot rap piano, tuned up vicious, headed for Taco Bell, so delicious. New Fiesta menu, just a 39 cents. I can't stop for you, girls, I got no room on the bench. New snack size, yes, understood. 39 cents never takes it so good. Snack size burritos, tacos, and more. I can't stop for you, girls, I got my foot on the floor. New Fiesta menu, yeah. Run for the border.
It's gotta be good.
Tomorrow, Monday, we've canceled 18. It's 0% interest for a year. Make 12 payments. No 18. 0% interest. Monday at American.
It's 0%. It's gotta be good.
Why wait? We've canceled 18. American. It's 0%. Tomorrow, Monday at American.
Sally Jesse Raphael, weekdays at 9 on The Source.
Treasure at the South Pole continues.
the threats to Antarctica launched defenders of the planet into the battle. Environmental campaigners such as Greenpeace backed the idea that Antarctica should be set aside as a world park or wilderness reserve. In a kind of Yellowstone at the bottom of the world, all drilling, mining, and industrial activity would be banned forever. And environmentalists would fight any decision to share out Antarctica's spoils. Kelly Rigg coordinated Greenpeace's Antarctic crusade.
The biggest thing that makes people angry about Antarctica is the thought that the oil companies are going to get in there and treat Antarctica the same way they've treated Alaska, and to allow the same kind of oil spills that have characterized the oil industry throughout the world to take place in Antarctica.
Greenpeace took the campaign to the ice with its own polar ship and even set up its own base. To alert the world to what was really going on, campaigners made surprise visits to bases. And their reports? Their reports showed that the treaty partners were far from living up to their responsibilities. Greenpeace didn't have to look hard to find examples. At Bellingshausen, the Russians have scattered their junk over the landscape for years. Tin cans, old radios, engines, rotting food. As most countries, they have simply ignored the treaty's rules for disposal of garbage. And this, Greenpeace alleges, makes them unfit to run Antarctica because they're incapable of protecting it. And Greenpeace made the most of the opportunity to influence public opinion with a picture story embarrassing the treaty that got into the New York Times. To bring the message home, campaigners filled bags with garbage and dragged them down to the beach in front of the base where they confronted Soviet workers, who were amused, if unmoved, while their station manager was in a predicament.
You got the message in which you explained why we collect this material, because it should go back
understand
on the ship.
You. Okay. Thank you for helping us, but it's not okay. No, please, in my only without cameraman.
He was persuaded by Greenpeace to take at least this pile of garbage out to a Soviet supply ship to carry it home. By de Porter ran Greenpeace's Antarctic operations.
What we see here in the Antarctic is that the treaty states right now, when they're just doing science, already cannot stick to some of the most simple rules, for instance, like waste disposal. Their responsibility is to look after the Antarctic properly. If you look at what they're doing, you see they're building bases for political reasons, they're building airstrips, they're building hotels, they're bringing in more and more commercial enterprise into the Antarctic, and that, I think, to live here in this pristine place and not to look after it is something that's completely unacceptable and unforgivable.
The evidence gathered by Greenpeace has cost treaty partners moral authority, put them on the defensive, and forced them to clean up their act. Last time Greenpeace came here to Chile's Martin base, the commander called them pirates with AIDS. This time, a new commander and his officers invited them to lunch and proudly explained how the base had been tidied up. But while the campaigners ate and drank, Greenpeace's Dr. Cornelius van Dorp was busy with a spade.
We've been digging around here, and what we find is that they've bulldozed here and that the garbage is all buried in gravel now, everywhere. Everywhere we dig here, we find bits of steel, drums, plastics, and so it's still a real mess. This area was originally set aside as an SPA, or a specially protected area, and the bases actually came here, the Russians and the Chileans, and used the melt lakes for a dump. These are the lakes, the excuse to come here in the first place. So it's quite ironic.
The manager of America's Palmer Station extended Greenpeace a cautious welcome. He could have locked them out of his buildings, but in the no-man's land of Antarctica, he couldn't stop Greenpeace from walking around.
I noticed several people are smoking. We ask you to be real aware of the no smoking areas and don't throw your cigarette filters around on the snow if you don't mind.
The United States has good reason to be wary of these unofficial inspections. Its base at McMurdo has been one of the worst polluters in Antarctica. It's the largest base on the continent, with up to 1,500 people, and environmentalists say it is appalling. Its record hardly inspires much confidence in the future. Vicki Getz worked at McMurdo before joining Greenpeace.
The practices that we see in McMurdo would never be permitted at home in a person's town or city. It would be like just going and destroying the city park. Just wouldn't be permitted. The amount of toxic heavy metals and other wastes that are pumped into the sea would be illegal in the United States, and yet it's been happening at McMurdo Station in Antarctica, the most unspoiled, pristine continent on the planet, or it should be.
In some bases, the campaign touched a sympathetic nerve. Scientists and staff at this British base, to a man, joined in a Greenpeace protest about their government's policy on exploiting Antarctica for minerals.
Let's have a wee of them, you miserable puppets. Come on.
There is another threat to the fragile Antarctic ecosystem, a problem that is getting worse all the time. Tourism is booming. Most are Americans who come by cruise ship from South America. The few oases of wildlife on the easily accessible shores of the peninsula attract and delight well-heeled adventurers. For tour operators, the Antarctic is wide open. You don't need passports or visas to land here. Only a few tiny areas of the continent have been set aside by the treaty and declared out of bounds to save them from damage by visitors. But there's no park ranger to check on what goes on. Theoretically, these Americans could be prosecuted if they took so much as a rock home, because the U.S. has signed the treaty. But no control can be exercised over people whose countries have not signed. And Dr. Rory Wilson, a British ornithologist, says tourism has risks.
Rather few scientists have actually studied the effects of tourists, of people, and of disturbance on penguins, and it's something that's really becoming far more crucial to our understanding of how the Antarctic system should be managed with respect to tourists. Penguin heartbeat frequency is raised significantly when people approach to within 50 meters, and by the time you're up to 3 meters, even if you come up slowly and the bird still doesn't seem to care, the heartbeat frequency is up by 50%. On land, penguins, like the Adelie penguins, don't have to deal with terrestrial predators and therefore have no normal running mechanism to deal with man. So they may as well just sit quiet. That doesn't mean they're not stressed. Tourism is obviously highly desirable if you happen to be a tourist, but the problem is, the real problem, I think, is that tourists want to visit places where animals are, and although the Antarctic is a very large place, there are rather few places within that large place where animals are, and therefore the places with animals tend to get exposed to a great many people. And before we can adequately quantify what's going to happen to these birds or these animals, there's going to be a massive swamping of tourists, and we're taking a bit of a gamble.
Here's to our seventh continent.
The seventh and last continent is a strong attraction with a tab of $500 a day. Even the Chilean Air Force is in the tour business. On this day, it wasn't carrying scientists or military personnel, but instead, American day trippers.
Woo!
These tourists were on a trip from the roof of the world in Tibet to Chile's March base at the bottom. It seems the most important thing is to prove you've been here.
Wasn't there a gift shop down here? Right there, the gift shop. Small. Small. Big. Wait a minute, don't don't pay that. We've already paid for it.
Though commercial activities are supposedly banned by the treaty, Chile is in it for the money.
This is great chicken, really.
Air Force crews serve champagne in flight. Officers become tour guides, and the base staff become waiters at the continent's only hotel. Even a world park, Chile says, will need hotels and tourist services, and they intend to provide them. Tourism is not without hazards. In 1979, a DC-10 plowed into a mountain near McMurdo, killing all on board. In January 1989, the Argentine Navy supply ship Bahia Paraiso hit a reef and overturned after taking 70 tourists to visit America's Palmer Station. It spilled 150,000 gallons of diesel oil into the area used by U.S. scientists for research. It was one of 3 ships damaged within the same 2 weeks. The passengers and crew were lucky to survive. There are no plans to salvage the wreck, and oil is still seeping out. It's a thorn in the side of the treaty, and a symbol to Greenpeace of what is wrong with the way the treaty members are running Antarctica.
As usual, my brother found a way to get me in trouble. And by the time I got out, our bus was gone. And so was he. That's when I started running, because no way was I going to let him beat me home.
At AT&T, we know every great athlete has been inspired by someone. As a proud sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team, we salute them all.
My brother, he still gets a kick out of seeing me run.
At universities like this, clinical studies prove there's a way to lose weight safely and effectively without caffeine or caffeine nervousness. It's Dexatrim. Dexatrim helps you control your appetite so you can lose weight without feeling hungry. And no other weight loss product has more published medical studies to show that it works. In fact, studies prove that 4 out of 5 people lost weight with Dexatrim. Now that's powerful proof.
Dexatrim, medically proven to help you lose weight.
It's time to rediscover American values with America's favorite minivans. Now, get special low monthly payments on Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, the only minivans with a driver's minivan airbag. Or rediscover American value with savings that make them the lowest price minivans you can buy with air conditioning and automatic transmission. Either way, it's time to rediscover American value on Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager. But don't wait. These savings advantages won't last.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
Same as in Motrin in non-prescription strength.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug.
Did you ever notice that a lot of pain relievers seem to be saying the same thing? Well, if you want the same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin, wouldn't it just be simpler to ask for Motrin IB? Non-prescription strength Motrin IB. You can't buy a more effective pain reliever without a prescription. Motrin IB. Accept no alternatives.
America's favorite magazines now become America's hottest new daytime series. Robin Wagner and Gayle King on Cover to Cover, coming Monday, July 29th on NBC.
This week, how the Food and Drug Czar watches out for you, and MTV. It's revolutionized music and television. The Daily Difference on NBC Nightly News.
This is the reality of Antarctica that angers environmentalists. Britain is building this $20 million runway for direct access to yet more of the continent. The French are blasting another runway through a penguin colony at their base. The United States wants a permanent runway at McMurdo. Australia, Italy, and Peru are looking for runway sites. More bases are going in as China, Korea, France, Japan, and Germany extend their operations. In 1988, after 6 years of secret negotiation, the treaty members reached unanimous agreement on how to exploit Antarctic minerals. Chris Beebe of New Zealand orchestrated the plan.
It is an agreement that contains extremely tough standards which have to be met before any mining can take place. And in particular, it requires the consent of all the countries that are active in Antarctica before any exploration or any development can occur. A total veto, a total ban on mining until all are agreed.
Even if actual for-profit development seems a long way off, the minerals agreement would let prospectors into Antarctica immediately. And this, say environmentalists like Jacques Cousteau, makes exploitation inevitable.
It doesn't make any sense today to talk about mining in the Antarctic because we know that it could be very detrimental to the rest of the world. Mining is ruthless. Mining is brutal. Mining uses explosives, oil, all sorts of energy sources. How sure the accidents would happen.
Treaty members have scrambled to recover lost credibility. A new code of conduct for disposing of wastes such as poisons, plastics, radioactive materials, and sewage was agreed after years of dithering. Anything harmful to Antarctica's environment must now be taken out. Open burning is prohibited. Garbage dumps are being cleaned up. British supply ships no longer leave empty. The U.S. has committed $50 million to cleaning up its mess. To demonstrate its commitment, the treaty began tougher policing. A joint French and German inspection team at America's Palmer Station checking on whether it's conforming with the treaty's rules.
Yes, sir. That's Dr. Hiro from Cramped.
Unlike the Greenpeace visit, the base commander has had 48 hours notice of this official and cordial inspection.
And after we have finished the outside inspection, then we go inside and have our interrogations. Is that okay with you?
Yes, that sounds fine.
I do not know what the proper English term is.
Oh, no, that's fine.
It's an interview. That is
Interrogation
has a legal. No, there's nothing legal about that. Although it is according to the treaty, so it might even be an interrogation.
The U.S. in turn has inspected other bases, all aimed to show that Antarctica is safe in the treaty's hands, that the treaty system is strong enough to make its own decisions.
All this has greatly improved during the past 3 years.
When the treaty met in Paris in 1989, approval of the minerals agreement should have been a formality, but it ran into trouble. France and Australia, bowing to pressure from environmentalists, refused to sign. Others followed suit, and the minerals agreement was dead. The unanimity that was the treaty's greatest strength was gone, raising the specter that the treaty could fall apart. The nightmare the treaty had been designed to avoid was nearer. Tucker Scully of the State Department.
If the treaty were to fall apart, I think an entire area of the world would be open to the kinds of political competition and conflict that have been avoided there for the past 30 years and that have so bedeviled the rest of the planet.
You could have what I think could best be described as an unregulated scramble with two sorts of results. One, awful risks to the Antarctic environment, and secondly, a major risk of tension, dispute, argument, rivalry, and in the very worst case, conflict, because mining without rules raises all the questions about sovereignty that the Antarctic Treaty put on one side.
Conflict in Antarctica is not an abstract fear. Military presence already dominates Antarctic affairs. As we've noted, many countries use military personnel to man their bases and support scientists. Tensions are not far beneath the surface, especially in the Antarctic Peninsula. Chile's bases are run by its Army, Navy, and Air Force, and these generals have landed to take part in an exercise of covert sovereignty. Though illegal under the treaty, it's part of Chile's continuing effort to justify its claim on the basis of effective occupation. This meeting between the governor of Chile's southern province and the Regional Development Council is aimed at making the base a town, like any mainland town.
Estamos por iniciar aquí en Villa Las Estrellas, en la provincia antártica chilena.
The base commander will now be the mayor of Villa Estrellas, the town of the stars. 11 of the Air Force officers bring wives and children on their 2-year tours. Several children have been born here to strengthen Chile's claim to a territory that would double Chile's land area.
La base
At the school, like all children in Chile, the kids are taught who owns this part of Antarctica. They learn Antarctica has valuable mineral reserves, but are not told that two other nations claim the same territory. The British don't agree. Their claim to the same part of Antarctica has already played a part in one war. In 1982, Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, but the British kicked them out. Had they remained, the British would have had trouble keeping a foothold in this part of Antarctica. The British bases are towns, too. A postman visits to handle the Royal Mail with its special British Antarctic Territory stamps.
In exercise of the powers invested in me, I, Stuart James Lawrence, being Magistrate, British Antarctic Territory.
The base leader is already town clerk, coroner, and postmaster. Now he's being sworn in by a ship's captain as magistrate.
Antarctic Territory to take the oath of allegiance and the judicial oath.
I, Jeremy Glynn Coleman, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors according to law. So help me God.
From the Argentine Antarctic Territory, or land of San Martin, your friendly radio station, Radio Nacional Arcángel San Gabriel, is broadcasting.
But every afternoon, a different message is proclaimed to the world. This part of Antarctica is neither Chilean nor British, it is Argentinian.
Radio Nacional Arcángel San Gabriel, la emisora más austral del mundo, difundimos nuestro espacio dedicado a...
At Esperanza Station, everybody wears a uniform. It's run by the Army. Wives and children help Argentina, just like Chile, to justify its claim on the basis of blood. A pregnant woman was deliberately sent here with her husband, so the first baby born on the continent would be Argentinian. With 3 countries claiming this part of Antarctica, 4 claiming most of the rest of it, and others waiting to post their claims, a failure to agree on future mineral exploitation would have obvious and frightening consequences. At an emergency meeting in 1990, an attempt to paper over the cracks failed. 8 countries, led by France and Australia, pushed for a permanent ban. 16 others, including the United States and Great Britain, rejected the idea. In desperation, another emergency meeting was held where grudgingly all the nations accepted the compromise proposal of a 50-year ban. But without a permanent ban or rules for mining, the options remain open, and the future of Antarctica and the treaty remain in doubt.
The irony is that the minerals agreement the environmentalists so oppose would have created such strict environmental controls and powers of veto that most treaty members believed it would have prevented mining and drilling. But by fighting it so strenuously, opponents could end up torpedoing the treaty itself, opening the way for unchecked, uncontrolled, and hideously damaging exploitation of the continent.
The problems have not been solved, just surrendered to a future generation, when the pressures to find new resources can only have increased.
Depending on society's need for commodities, metals, minerals in this case, we may get to the point where there's no choice. And in the future, mankind needs resources. There really may be only one option. That is, you have to go to the far corners of the world to procure them, and the Antarctic is one of those places.
Any decision that fails to take this into account will only hasten the day when one country, if only to score a political point, steps outside the treaty and declares, "This is mine." It could trigger the biggest land grab in history, a disaster for this wondrous continent, a catastrophe for mankind.
If you think you've got to eat itty-bitty portions to go from this to this, take it from Tommy Lasorda. Try Ultra Slim Fast frozen entrees. Larger, more satisfying portions than the leading diet entrees without a lot more calories. Of course, they're sensible entrees that are low in fat. I could have one every day. So try our Ultra Slim Fast entrees. They're even big enough for me.
Ultra Slim Fast. Give us a week. We'll take off the weight.
Having trouble getting all your liquid dishwasher detergent out of the bottle? Relax. Try new Cascade Liquid Gel. It comes out of the bottle like it should. First time, every time. And because it's pre-dissolved, it rinses away to leave your dishes sparkling, virtually spotless. New Cascade Liquid Gel.
It only happens twice a year. Sears' best easy living paint sale. All finishes, all colors, at Sears' lowest price of the year. Like this flat finish for just $13.99. Save $4. Sale ends Saturday, July 27th at Sears.
Personnel, please.
7th floor.
Now, when life turns up the heat, there's Degree antiperspirant. Because it's body heat activated, Degree turns on extra protection when you really need it. Degree, your body heat turns it on.
This week on Today, Cher talks about her hot new album, Love Hurts,
This is the best album I've ever made.
and her always changing multifaceted career. This week on Today.
In 1913, they called it the crime of the century. Today, it's a critically acclaimed television event. New York Magazine says it's exactly what network television ought to do more of. TV Guide says Jack Lemmon is excellent. Los Angeles Magazine calls it gripping and engrossing. Based on a true story, Jack Lemmon stars in the murder of Mary Fagan, NBC Tonight. This is one of the most powerful devices in the world. When used properly, it can help catch criminals that have eluded justice for decades, reunite lost loves, find the keys to ancient mysteries. This Wednesday, you can use this device. Watch Unsolved Mysteries on NBC.
At Dairy Queen, you can order one of our plump, juicy hot dogs with melted cheese, onions, or chili. It's one reason why, when it comes to selling hot dogs, Dairy Queen is top dog. Taste the cool, delicious Dairy Queen Mr. Misty. Or take your pick of a Mr. Misty Freeze or Float. Now, isn't that refreshing?
We treat you right.
Complete customer satisfaction is our #1 priority at WGNR Furniture. Our 7-day buyback policy is another one of our many services we've implemented just for you. Make your purchases at WGNR with complete confidence. We'll deliver your furniture and give you a 7-day return privilege. Is it the right color? Does it fit the space in your room? Now you can make sure everything is just right or return it for full exchange or refund with our 7-day buyback policy. Another special service just for you from WGNR Furniture.
Golden Girls, weekdays at 4 on The Source.